welcome all to the first learning session of the ICF Bengaluru chapter of the current team. Although we had a great 2-day conference, international conference on coaching, and that was a major success. And subsequent to that, we have been having some events, but on the webinar side, we are having this first one. And we already have lined up the webinar for next month, details of which I'll give at the end of today's session. And my only request is all those who are joining, I request everyone to be on the mute. And so everyone to be on the mute, and only the speaker, concerned speaker, unmutes himself and speak. I'm not going to unmute anyone, but I'm just giving the opportunity to everyone to mute themselves and speak it up. And I will now request Ravi Srinivasan, who has met Guthrie and who knows him, to introduce the speaker. And after that, it will be all over to you, Guthrie. And Guthrie, only one thing is, you can tell at the beginning of the session, how do you want it, the questions in between, later, how you want it, and we'll go follow that norm. And anyway, I'll be watching the chat box and keeping a track of the questions which comes up. And if you can also see it, but if something comes up to me, I'll let you know. Is that fine with you?
That's fine. I'm happy to take questions during my presentation. I don't mind being interrupted. I like having the conversation.
Great. So I leave it to you when you present. So Ravi, can you take over now and introduce the speaker, please?
Sure. Thanks, Bobby. I hope everybody can hear me. It is indeed a pleasure and honor to introduce Dr. Guthrie Sayen to the ICF Bangalore Charter members, as well as the other participants. I have known him for more than a decade. Guthrie has been and continues to be a key member of several leading coach training and development organizations. Guthrie works with coaches globally at all stages of their careers, from beginners to masters. His palette comprises wide spectrum, right from standard coach training pedagogy, voice dialogue, to internal family system, etc. He synergizes all these in his own unique manner. Guthrie holds a PhD from the University of Connecticut and is a graduate of Princeton University. I suggest that you visit his portal to get a good feel for his divine path, as he calls it. Lastly, one statement of his I always keep in mind: empower your clients and simultaneously transform your inner world. Thank you. Over to you, Guthrie.
Thank you, Ravi. So I once heard it said that a successful introduction is one that makes the speaker, the one being introduced, blush. So Ravi, that was successful.
Thank you.
So one thing I would add to my biography that's relevant for this webinar is that I've spent the last 5.5 years translating internal family systems, a psychotherapeutic model, into language and principles that coaches can easily grasp and apply. And to prepare you, and actually to prepare me too, for my presentation, I'd like us to begin with a meditation. And I will guide us in that. So the first part of this meditation really involves coming into your body. Coaching and meditation and self-leadership are all embodied experiences. So arrange your body, find a seat that allows you to be upright and alert. Open and receptive. And as you think of opening the center of your chest. And being relaxed and at ease. So let muscles that might be doing any extra work release. And feel yourself now coming fully into your body. Feel the volume of your body and its weight. Feel the weight coming down into your seat. Feeling supported. And grounded. Rumi, the great Sufi poet and mystic, says, "This being human is a guest house." And so we are innkeepers. And our job is to offer hospitality to all our parts. And our parts, our subpersonalities, show up as thoughts, emotions, and body sensations. And so the radical experiment that I invite you to try right now is to welcome, perhaps with an ever so gentle smile, all your thoughts. All your emotions. All your body sensation. These are all parts of you. And these parts are happiest when treated like we wish to be treated. By welcoming them. Among them, says Rumi, may be a meanness, a jealousy, a host of sorrows. Meet them at the door laughing. Welcome them all. They are messengers from beyond. So imagine that you are a guest house with hundreds of rooms. And each room is perfect for one of your parts. So let all your parts know that for this moment, they are welcome. They will be fully accepted. They will be nourished. They will be offered connection. Even if one of those voices in you or several of them are causing you distress, see if you can separate enough to let them know that you're here and that their distress makes sense, even if you don't understand it yet. That you know on faith that their distress can be understood. And now, if it feels right to you, ask all your parts if they would try softening back. If they would take the next 30 to 60 seconds to relax and open space. Let them know that in this moment, there is no problem to solve. There is nothing to do. And so they can rest and wait. And if your parts are willing to try this experiment and they do relax back, separate from that seat of awareness that we call self with a capital S, you might get a taste of self. You might get a taste of some of the calm, clarity, and confidence of self. So whether your parts were able to relax back or not, thank them. They all have noble intentions, even if we don't yet understand them. And we're going to prepare to move from the inner realm into the outer realm, where we're sitting together in circle. To connect and learn. Okay. I just want to check with Ravi. My computer did a little something a moment ago, or with Bobby. Are you still hearing me? Bobby, are you?
I'm hearing you, Guthrie. I could hear you everything.
Okay, good. Thank you. So there, a part of me just now got scared that I had lost the internet connection. But that part is relieved to know that we're together and that we can hear each other. So I see three major objectives for this webinar. The first is to learn a new map of the psyche. That is a new way of looking at and understanding the human mind and spirit. The second is to help you begin to cooperate with the natural healing wisdom of the psyche by treating parts of the mind with respect. So that's in part what the meditation was about. Bringing an accepting attitude to all facets of our minds. And the third objective is to give you a vision of transformation through compassion. So let me begin with a bold assertion. Here it is. The goal of all coaching, the goal of every coaching session is to help clients access and live from self with a capital S. This is called self-leadership, which is our subject. And to help clients access and live from self means that you and I, as coaches, need to access and coach from self. So let me say a few more things about self so you get an idea of what I'm talking about. The ultimate purpose of all spiritual practices is to gain access to what I'm calling self. So self could be called the divine within, Atman, Buddha nature, Christ consciousness, the Tao. Every major religion and spiritual tradition recognizes self, what I'm calling self. It is our true nature. And our true nature is awake, calm, creative, loving, wise, and good. It's a lot, isn't it? Not only that, we can gain access to self more easily than supposed. So all we need is a homeopathic dose of self, or what is commonly called a critical mass of self. We need just enough self so that in a coaching session we can begin to be with our clients from a place of curiosity rather than judgment, a place of compassion. And even if we're not sure where the coaching session's going, we're able to be calm and confident. So I'm going to say more about self shortly, but I want to introduce some other key ideas. I've divided the principles of IFS into 6 key axioms, and I'm going to talk about 4 of those today. The first 4 tenets of coaching for self-leadership. So the first idea is that we have many parts. That the human psyche, the human mind, naturally subdivides into sub-personalities. That this is natural, normal, healthy, even beneficial. So we all have lots of parts. And let me give you some examples that you might recognize. You might have a part that strives, that attempts to achieve, that can act like a taskmaster, pushes us to be successful. We might have a part that is concerned about our image and how we look. So I notice when I come on a webinar, the first thing I do, I check is, does my hair look okay? Or am I looking like a wild man? We have parts that seek approval from other people. We have optimistic parts and pessimistic parts. Often in the coaching profession, we have prominent parts that want to take care of other people. We also have parts that distract us. One place you can notice your parts is when you have a difficult decision to make. And one part may want you to do A, another part may want you to do B, and a third part doesn't even want to think about it. So what passes for thinking is often our parts, our sub-personalities in conversation in our heads. So one way this parts view of the psyche, this idea that the human mind is naturally moldable, is that it's a good way to see our clients and to understand them. it's the client's managers. These are protectors that are concerned with our functioning in the world, that want us to improve, to learn, to be better, to get ahead. They get us to do our homework in school. They help us to complete projects at work. These are the parts that hire coaches. And often these same people have parts that, distract them from their goals. I can imagine that you might have set aside time on a weekend to accomplish certain things. And you ended up binge watching Netflix. So those are distractor parts. And all these parts are trying to protect young, vulnerable parts. So if you ever have a moment where you're feeling unlovable, unworthy, incompetent, or ashamed, you're probably blended with a young, vulnerable, childlike part. So the first big idea is that we have many parts, and this is natural and healthy. The second big idea is truly radical. The second big idea is that all parts are good. There are no exceptions to this. All parts are good. Some parts are stuck in dysfunctional roles. So maybe you have a part that judges you, evaluates you, criticizes you, can be even merciless in doing that. If we got to know that part respectfully, if we treated that part with dignity, if we sought to understand that part with curiosity and compassion, and to see the world through that part's eyes, we would begin to understand it. And as that part began to feel understood, it would begin to relax a little. It would de-escalate. Because these parts actually want to help. They are trying to help, and they have adopted dysfunctional strategies, often when we were children, under extreme circumstances. And they were doing the best they could then, and they haven't learned a new way of doing things since then. So this is true even for parts that may be addicted to substances like alcohol or drugs, or addicted to the internet or pornography. If we got to understand these parts, we would see that they actually had positive intentions, and that if liberated from their roles, they would be powerful allies in your system. And so we welcome all parts. We welcome all parts. So the first big idea is we have many parts. And the second big idea is that all parts are good. All are trying to be helpful, even if using dysfunctional strategies. The third big idea is that we are self. So self is the ground of our being. It's the seat of our consciousness. It's that which can see and hold all the parts. regardless of those parts' behaviors or feelings. Whether their behaviors are dysfunctional and their feelings are pain, fear, and shame. Self can hold them. Self can see them for what they really are. In other words, self can see clearly. Self can see what our parts really are and understand them from their perspective. And if we can put parts into relationship with self, healing begins. So this is a method of working with parts that can bring healing to the inner system.
So it will go up to the wall, get the...
Go ahead. I think someone...
Yeah. I also want to say that self is the natural leader of the inner realm, but that because of circumstances in our lives, our parts have not trusted self. And so we usually have a cluster of parts, usually manager parts, that try and run our lives for us. Self is characterized by 8 words that begin with the letter C. And I've been gradually introducing these words to you, starting with the meditation. So, self is naturally calm. Self has clarity. Self is confident. Self is curious and compassionate, probably the 2 most important qualities for us coaches. Self is curious and compassionate. Self is also courageous, willing to lead with the heart, willing to stay present for the pain of our parts or for the pain of our clients' parts. Self naturally connects. And self is creative. I think I got all 8. If I didn't, we'll figure it out. But self is naturally creative. So our inner world comprises parts and self is not a part. It's our divine core, it's our essence. So the 4th big idea, the 4th tenet of coaching for self-leadership is that the goal of all coaching is self-leadership, an idea I introduced right at the beginning of the webinar. So no matter what pathway or strategy that you might use to help your clients, no matter what skills you use, the ultimate objective is to help the client into a self-led life. Because when a client has access to self-energy, it knows how to creatively maneuver among the circumstances of their life. We can think of self and parts like an orchestra. The natural leader of an orchestra is the conductor. the natural leader of our internal systems is self. The orchestra itself is made up of players, each playing a musical instrument of some kind. These are like our parts. So without self, without a conductor, there's no harmony. But without parts, without players, there's no sound. Now the problem is, most of us have not had self-leadership modeled for us. We've experienced different levels of trauma. Our parts have interpreted things to mean that we're bad or unworthy or unlovable. And we've developed strategies to cope with that. Or to put it in the terms of our metaphor, some parts have gotten up out of the orchestra and they're trying to run the orchestra. But if they got up out of the violin section, they're trying to run it mainly for the other violinists, you know? And if they got up out of the horn section, that's where their loyalties lie. With self, everyone's included, everyone participates. So in a healed system, in a healed inner system, the parts trust self. They don't have to challenge self because they trust self, sees, loves, and respects them, and will offer them the opportunity to offer their gifts. So, Bobby, I'm seeing a sign that says can't hear you. Is that all right? Are you all able to hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Oh, okay. All right. I just saw something in the chat that said can't hear you. Okay. Let's see. Let me just reset. So in a healthy inner system, parts step forward when needed and step back when they've completed their job. So for example, if I have a part that likes to teach, it can step forward and offer its gifts. But then when things shift and maybe another teacher wants to speak, that part can step back because it trusts self-leadership. Let me see if there are any questions before I'm going to move on to another section of comments. Let's see if people can Bobby, do people know how to raise their hands? And I can see that if they do. Questions or comments, you can raise your hand. I'm not seeing any questions. Okay.
I have a slight clarification that I'm trying to look at. First of all, let me thank you for what I've been hearing till now. I think it's amazing. And it's more than just insightful. So, it's really, I'm really feeling transformed in a very different way. But my question is, there are so many different parts. And at least in my own self, these parts are trying to talk or trying to make themselves heard almost at the same time. And for me, when that's happening as an orchestra, it's not music. It's more what should I say, sound and something which is not harmonious to me. So how do I learn, or what do I need to do to try and listen in a way that I listen to each part at a pace which is good for me.
Mm. So one technique that you can use to do this is, Jagdish, is use a Jungian technique called active imagination. And you can do this on paper or in a Word document. And you could put J for you and say, I'd like to talk to some of my parts. I will give you all a chance. Who needs to go first? And you can make an agreement if several want to go first, that you'll go 5 or 10 minutes with one part and then you'll shift to another part. I do that with clients. I say it seems like we're hearing from 4 or 5 different parts. I name them. I say who needs to go first. If 2 need to go at once, I say, how about if which would one allow the other to go first if we only give the first one 5 minutes and promise to come to the second one immediately? I usually get agreement, and I have to keep that agreement of not going over the 5 minutes. If you make a pledge to a part, you want to keep it. Another way of working with parts that, with multiple parts that want to check in is to have what I call a roundtable process, in which you invite them all to sit at a round table or to sit in a circle of chairs in your mind's eye. And you say, we'll just go around the circle and we'll hear from everybody. Does that answer your question?
Thank you. It's amazing, and it's so simple.
Yeah.
For years we've been conducting meetings, and it's simply that. Just conduct it in a way that you give each one a chance to speak.
Exactly.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. The simplest answer of all, Jagdish, is if you just treat the parts like people. That's the way they respond best. So thank you for your question.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Okay, I'll say a few more things, and then I hope to have more questions. I want to have a little bit of a conversation. So I want to make, I guess, 5 points on developing self-leadership, because that's our topic, self-leadership. So the first idea is you can easily begin to notice, identify, and get to know your parts. If you find yourself snapping at your partner or a child, you're blended with a part, because that's not how self behaves. So you can easily begin to notice, identify, and get to know your parts. They show up as thoughts, emotions, and body sensations. And as I was just illustrating with Jagdish, you can interact with them. You can either do it on paper in a Word document, or you can just do it in your mind's ear. So the first thing to do is just begin to notice these voices and see if you can begin to separate them. Second is that identifying and welcoming parts. So you have to have a little separation from them to do that. So that's a way of accessing self-energy. So by identifying and welcoming parts, you improve self-acceptance. And so the more parts that you can identify, the more self-acceptance you can have. And this is especially true of those vulnerable parts that sometimes feel hurt or unlovable or ashamed. Those are moments, if you can just be quiet and be with them, not push them away, and just hold space for those parts of you, that are suffering. Third idea is that as you bring compassion to the internal world, and that's my major message, bringing compassion to the inner and ultimately to the outer world. As you bring compassion to the internal world, to your parts, so you begin to bring compassion to the external world. You begin to see your clients and other people as being dominated by parts. So as you bring more compassion to your inner world, you become an agent of healing both within and without. Fourth idea on developing self-leadership. One practical way to bring self-leadership to both inner and outer realms is to speak for your parts, to speak on behalf of your parts rather than from or as a part. So this is an important idea, and I'll illustrate it for you. So let's say something happens in a part of me gets triggered, gets angry. I can say to the person who triggered me, I can say, you know what? When you said X and Y, a part of me got triggered, and that part felt anger. And maybe that part misunderstood what you were saying. Could you tell me again what you wanted to tell me? So that's a self-led way of telling someone that what they said triggered anger in me. It's not blaming them. It's taking responsibility for the reaction of my own part. And it's also becoming curious about their motivation. And I'm guessing from that, even that small role play, you can see how that would help the other person to maybe de-escalate from where they were if they were in a kind of triggered position themselves. So I spoke on behalf of my parts. And when I speak on behalf of my parts, when I stand up for them, so I don't let it pass, I don't pretend I wasn't triggered. I stand up for my parts. They trust my leadership, that I can stand up for them and be a good mediator for them. The other way I could do that would be to simply blend with the angry part and yell at the other person in an angry way and say, what do you mean? You're a fool. You completely misunderstood everything. I don't know what you're talking about. Get out of here. You know, that's probably an exaggeration, but that's blending with the part rather than speaking for it. So this, I think, is one of the most important life skills we can develop, is to become honest advocates for our parts without blending with them. And then the final point that I'd like to make regarding developing self-leadership is, as you improve self-leadership, you heal. And you bring healing to the world. So as you improve self-leadership, you bring healing to the inner world and to the outer world. When self leads, we bring compassion, vision, fairness, and nurturance to all human systems. all human systems have what they need to flourish, from the individual to the family to society. With self-leadership, we can leverage our natural resources. And what works inside works outside. So the same principles work in all human systems, whether they're internal, external and small like a family, or external and large like the whole planet. Same principles apply. Okay, so I'd love to have some questions and comments.
Thanks, Guthrie. This is Nitin here.
Nitin, yes.
It's a very interesting, how do I say that, metaphor to bring in different parts. Two questions now. One is, when there is a part of you which is ashamed,
Yes.
how do you bring compassion towards that? For example, somebody who's smoking, and part of him doesn't like smoking.
Yeah.
But then there is a part who doesn't quit either.
Yeah. Yeah.
So how do you bring equality and compassion to both? That's first part of my question.
Yes.
And I would let you answer that, then I'll ask second.
Okay, great. So there's there's really, I would say, at least 3 parts present already. So there's the part that wants to stop smoking. I would call that the manager. It's one of the protectors. And then there's the part that uses smoking as a way of soothing the inner world. I would call that a distractor, soother, also known as a firefighter. And then there's the part that feels awful. So let's say the manager says, you need to stop smoking, and tries to enforce that. But the part that wants to smoke keeps smoking. And so the manager says, you're weak and bad, and smoking's bad for your health. That just makes the exile, the child part, the one that carries the shame, feel even worse, which triggers the smoker, which triggers the one that wants to stop the smoking, which then triggers the one that feels ashamed, and you've got a vicious cycle. So of these 3 parts, which is the bad one? So that's just a trick question. We go back to tenet number 2. All parts are good. So there is no bad part. So probably what we would need to do if we were working with that client, Nitin, is we would need to get permission from the one who wants to stop smoking to have an extended conversation with the one that uses smoking as a strategy for soothing. And we would get to know that smoker and understand the world from its perspective. In other words, we would unblend it from self, and we would befriend it and understand it from its perspective. And we would get permission from that one to talk to probably the child part that it's protecting. But perhaps before we go to the child part, we would check in with the one that wants to stop smoking and see if it's okay if we go to that child part. With permission from the 2 protectors, we would go to the child part that's hurting, the one that carries the shame. And we would witness it. We would hear its story from its perspective. In other words, self, the healing agent, would receive the story and love the child that tells the story. And when the child feels fully understood, and this is very cool thing. It can then unburden the shame that it's been carrying. It can be a ritual unburdening in which it gives up the shame to earth, water, fire, wind, or the light, something like that. And once that child is healed, we go back to the protectors. Now it is more likely that the smoker might be able to find another way of serving the system rather than soothing it with nicotine. Is that a clear answer, Nitin?
I understand. I think I understand what you're saying, but it is a complex discussion that must happen among the parts, is I guess what I meant.
Yes. So the key point is all parts need to be treated with respect, including the part that uses smoking.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
If somebody has a question, I can ask the second one.
Nitin, I think let's give somebody else a chance. Is there somebody else ready to ask a question? If not, Nitin can go ahead with the second question.
Can I ask a question, please? This is Ravi.
Yes, please, Ravi.
Guthrie, when you talk of parts, we are mostly talking of, I would say, if I may use the word, personal parts. There are some professional parts also. Then how do you bring the two together into really a balance and, appreciating, respecting everyone?
Yeah, we have personal and impersonal parts. The way we bring parts into respectful relationship is by first coming into respectful relationship with them. And so what we want to do is unblend from the part, whether it's a personal or an impersonal part, and then be in relationship with it. And so the gift that we coaches can give our clients is to help them separate from a part and then to get to know that part from self, that is with curiosity and compassion. Does that answer it for you, Ravi?
Yes, thank you. I think it's a very good step to move forward. Let me try it out and see how it works. Thank you.
So I have a question. This is MG. Guthrie, is it okay to ask you now, or?
Yes, go ahead, MG.
Okay. Now, the part which is difficult to, which we call good and bad, and you said all of them are good anyway. When we treat a good part and the bad part exactly the same way, the traditional good part, is it not likely to feel, wait a minute, I have been a good part all along, and how the hell has kept this person equate me the same way with the other part? Deep inside my mind, I know what's a good part. Although I may like to treat them equal, I have classified them as good and bad. I can't bluff myself.
So actually, MG, it's a part of you that has classified them as good and bad. Self is able to see, love, and hold all parts, regardless of how your parts or other people's parts may regard your parts. Even if they classify them as good and bad, self sees them as parts who are doing the best they can, and in their healed state will be at service. So if we see parts as good or bad, we're actually blended with a part that is evaluating other parts. I think this is, we're at time, and with your permission, I just want to tell you that, and maybe I can send an email later, but I'm going to lead a 5-part teleseminar, five-part, I think it's a Zoom webinar actually, on coaching for self-leadership. And it's being sponsored by the ICF chapter of Maryland, which is one of the states in the US. And it will be on alternate Tuesdays beginning in late March. And it will begin at 8:30 p.m. IST, India Standard Time. So I just wanted to, maybe I can send an email to all of you about that. So thank you.
So any questions, anyone? Or how is it?
So there's a question from Pandu in the chat. He's asking, thoughts, emotions, feelings, desires are all play of mind. Mind precedes matter. Then how we separate part?
How is the what?
Mind precedes matter. Then how we separate parts?
We can. That's the primary skill. And what we do is we ask the parts to unblend. We ask them to step back. So let's say there's a part of me that feels pressed for time. I can begin to notice and welcome that part. And just by doing that, I begin to get a little separation. And I can say to that part, what's your concern? And then I can receive the part's concern. So I have an internal conversation.
Okay.
Hello.
Thanks.
Hi, this is Yatin here. Can I ask a question?
Sure. My understanding was that we were going for an hour, and I can go a few more minutes, but I have a client calling in 8 minutes. But I can go another 5 minutes. So what is your question?
Okay, I have a small follow-through on the question which Nitin asked. I think it was a good question, and I think what you said makes great sense. I think it was enlightening to understand from that perspective. My question is, and please allow me if I'm using some conventional layman kind of a terminology. What I hear makes perfect sense to me, but that's more cognitive level. In a sense, if I use the word head and heart, my head buys in exactly what you said, those three components, and then how to handle it. Now, I find the transformation is complete only when the things percolates deeper from head to heart.
Wait, could you repeat the last part? You find the transformation is complete.
Complete when what I understand, my head understands, percolates deep into my heart. So, do I understand that I complete the transition through deeper self-reflection, through meditation, or how do I connect those two things so that it becomes reality for me?
For the Sufis, the heart, what they call the heart, is what we're calling self. And meditation is a way of experiencing self-energy, and that's why I began with a meditation to give everybody a little bit of a taste. And yes, integration happens when we can accept in our hearts, if I'm understanding correctly, when we can accept in our heart all our parts. As we bring our parts into our hearts, we heal. That's a good way to put it.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So thank you, Guthrie. Bobby here. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, Bobby. Yes.
Thanks for a great seminar, and I think the sort of questions asked also reflect that deeper learning and journeys happening within each one of us. And some of us have not asked questions because it's still shocking to us as to what is going through, what is the real thing which is going on. But I think overall from the comments I got from everyone that it has been a great seminar. And it's really great that you said that the ICF chapter of Maryland will be conducting the 5-part seminar on the self-leadership, coaching through self-leadership. So once we get the mail, I'll share it with my members and they'll have an opportunity to get through that. So on behalf of ICF Bengaluru, I really want to thank you for a great session. And this was one of its kind, and really want to thank you for the time and appreciate your efforts. Thank you very much.
You're welcome, Bobby. I love connecting with my brothers and sisters in India. I always enjoy it.
Thank you. So we look forward to seeing you in India sometime.
Yes, I look forward to seeing all of you.
Thank you.
For the benefit of other members, if you want, since you have client call, you can log off if you want, because I have to make some more information to the others. So otherwise, you can be on the call. I want to respect your time, and you have client call coming in. That's why I'm saying this. Okay, members, the only thing is next, we are having a call. Next webinar will be on March 20th at the same time around 7:30 p.m. and it will be on coaching cultures, and it will
To hear you.
we'll be talking about a tool. Sorry, I think something went off. Reconnected. We'll be talking about a tool on how you can assess the present culture in organization with respect to coaching, and how you can help grow a culture of coaching within your client organizations. And the speaker will be Tim Hawkins from UK. And those who are registered, we basically follow ICF Code of Ethics. So those who are registered, and about 32 participants are there. And we'll be issuing out the CCUs for today's session. And we'll also be we are looking forward to some more sessions in the coming months. And one more information is April 29th to May 5th is the ICW. And we look forward to suggestions from each one of you. And if any of you have a great speaker in mind who you think can be part of ICW or even for the monthly webinars, we'll be more than willing to get those names so that more different topics we cover, and we hear speakers who have not been covered in earlier webinars or ABS sessions. It will be of immense value to us. With that, a great thanks to everyone for making this webinar successful, and 32 participants. A big thank you from ICF Bengaluru chapter. Any questions? Otherwise, I'll close this thing.
Thank you, Bobby. Thank you, Nitin. Thank you, Ravi.
So I assume there are no questions. With that, thank you. So I assume there are no questions. I'm going to end the meeting. Thank you very much. Good night, everyone.
Thank you, guys. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.